Welcome to Do What Matters Most. This is episode 5 in the series, Current Trends That Are Modern Mistakes. Many institutions that influence our children are being pressured to provide content that satisfies modern-day ideologies rather than what solid research shows is beneficial to children. We are also being faced with the idea that our traditional forms of individualism often run wild without any connection to the needs we have for nurture and support. The resulting emotional problems for our children are evidence that this is increasing. In addition, the evolution of internet programs provides new and more insidious opportunities to exert harmful influence on children. Learn how to prevent these potential negative effects on your children.
When I started looking at the social conditions in our world and the impact that they had on our children, I thought maybe I would mention 2 or 3 as an example so that I could just issue a small voice of warning and hopefully alert some parents as to the kinds of conditions that their children are facing. In my professional practice, I have seen numerous cases where parents have brought their children who have gotten themselves into real trouble. And after the parents learned about what their children were involved with, they said things like, "Wow, I had no idea." Or, "Where have I been?" Or, "How could this happen without me knowing about it?" I am also acquainted with research about adolescents, for example, that ask them what they're doing, and they do this anonymously, so it is possible for them to reveal quite a few things about their lives. Then the research asks parents whether or not their children are participating in it, there is clear, I repeat, clear evidence that quite frequently parents are clueless about what children, even at age 9 or 10, are actually doing. And I know that happens because we don't see the signs or we are busy or something like that. But I think to begin with, in part 3 of this series, I am going to say it is clear that we need some way to bring ourselves closer together and parents ask more, teach more, and get way more involved in their kids where the parents learn about the societal experiences that their children are having outside the home. I only originally thought that I would do a 2-part series, and then I've recently come across some other things which I think are so significant that I should add part. So I have left those out, and now I'm going to take care of those. Now, to illustrate the point and dramatize the issue that I want to convey, I want to tell you about a time my wife was giving me an account of an early life experience for her in elementary school. She was in the 3rd or 4th grade, and she heard over the intercom, "Will Christine Smith, that's not her real name, please go home and make her bed?" Now, you might smile when you hear that, as I did, but also think about what that means. The mother had likely called the school, and the school principal, in order to help the mother out, actually could have gone to the classroom and privately talked to Christine or whatever her name was, but instead had just announced it over the PA system and to this child who probably will make her bed after that before she goes to school for a long time. The school she was going to was participating in the rearing of children, and they felt like they should be an extension of the parents. Now, many institutions of education, especially colleges, operate on the legal terminology of in loco parentis, or they may have, which means that they have some legal rights that parents do in regard to their students. They just assume them because they'll make policies or procedures designed to protect their students. In yesteryear, we could be fairly confident about our public institutions and their commitment to make contributions to our families. And there are many who do so now, even to this day. But in those years, there was so much that many parents actually relied on them to take care of some of the teaching and rearing responsibilities they would ordinarily provide as parents. That was not a good thing, in my opinion. I think those tasks have always been the responsibility and opportunity for parents, but sometimes parents don't do well, and so institutions like Government and child welfare programs assume some of those responsibilities. But as we have seen, there has been a growing trend where more and more parents are increasingly suspicious of educational institutions in particular for their children and are taking steps to do more teaching at home, or they find private schools that will educate as the parents desire. Well, why? Well, because many parents are no longer confident that the school will in fact carry out their parental responsibilities and rearing children as the parents would like. And one of the things that means is that parents are more likely to become involved, or if they don't get involved, they're more likely to make errors. Now, we've also been long aware of the effects media have on our families and children, not just the content of the programming, but also the amount of time spent by children and adults who find the programs interesting and, in many cases, addicting. We're now seeing the results of many studies showing that extended use of the internet can slow brain growth, preventing adolescent development of the mental skills needed to address the challenges that age groups face. And as a result, we are seeing more problems with our adolescent kids, including impulsive decisions related to higher rates of crime, sexual activity, and chemical abuse. And it's also the case that many children are delaying in developing a set of internal controls so their emotions do not become regulated as quickly as they might when there is or under conditions that are more healthy. This means that mental and emotional skills may be lacking for some children who are now facing new temptations or more complex emotional contexts or circumstances, and without these tools they are having more difficulty in regulating anxiety, and as the result, the emotional condition of anxiety-induced depressions appears to rapidly increase. Now here's a small caveat. In truth, our history does not show a full societal commitment to our children. Never has, in my opinion. And our children are often the victims of the bad or less behavior of the adults, parents, and other people. It might also be the case that the political and economic forces currently at work in our society may motivate our institutions to be more concerned about an ideology of some kind and less concerned about the real needs for our families and children. So here is the first of the 3 threats I would like to express in this episode. It has to do with institutional ideologies, their sense of mission, and whether there is a benevolent approach to families and to children. Let's suppose, for example, that our schools are under pressure to teach some subjects which pressure comes from political parties or perceived demands from society at large to be relevant or pertinent, and in order to be successful, they must adapt what they teach. Critical race theory is one of these examples. Now, whether you agree or disagree with the ideas in this part of the curriculum, please also pay attention to what it was that promoted it in the first place. It likely was not groups of parents who demanded that schools teach it, but other institutions at the level of the schools or more larger, whose ideology which was brought to bear from a government or political force other than parental influence. Now also, please consider that critical race theory is just one of several additions to many school districts' curriculum. You might argue that some practices in our schools, such as desegregation, might not have happened if the government hadn't stepped in. And I believe that you would be right in that case. Desegregation, however, is benevolent to families and to our children, where critical race theory is being installed without any precedent or evidence that it benefits anyone or achieves its goals, other than satisfying the ideological demands of those who support it. Now, since the potential effects of this type of experience are long and lasting for our children, it seems like it would be wise for us to learn about the need for sound research before such dramatic changes take place in schools or any other institution that exerts influence on us and therefore our children. This, in my opinion, should take place whenever anyone suggests something that will impact our kids positively or negatively as much as such programs are actually capable of doing. It's amazing the amount of influence that such programs have in our children at schools, but also in our churches and also in government and also in other business institutions. The next trend, which I think is a modern mistake, is the idea that individualism is currently running rampant in our lives. And while historically our emphasis on rugged individual and individual responsibility has seen great benefits, largely which I personally agree with, as long as it's organized in a certain way. But when it is carried to the extreme and taught to us in our children, we are seeing the following forms of behavior emerge. This trend is manifest in many ways. One most prominent way is shown in the idea that truth, the perception of truth, is now called personal in nature, which means an individual's perception is the same thing as truth. And that in order to recognize the equality of every individual, now it is being demanded socially that it is necessary to allow each person to have his own view, and they are called the person's personal truth. Recently, this was manifest when one of our government leaders publicly congratulated a person for condemning one of our world allies because it was his, quote, personal truth. One wonders whether this political leader has any sense of truth that is universal or might be universal, and that if we individualize ourselves to such an extent, it will remove from us effective forms of morality and social benevolence. Also, it is each person's individual responsibility, we might think, to fend for themselves, so why care for the poor, decide for and by themselves how to live, and therefore they've made choices and they're the result of the choices, so we shouldn't care for them. Turned loose on our children, individualism run amok means that any form of sexual practice will be all right because it is one's choice. And we are seeing a fairly strong increase with young people who are sexually experimenting early in life. This is the consequence of the idea that I'm an individual, I'm free, and I can do what I want. And the old adage that you're free to choose, but you're not free to choose the consequences is never more significant than in that line of thinking. But now let's suppose that human beings benefit from the support and nurturance of others, and when that doesn't happen, then our children are likely vulnerable or more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, and other profound displays of loneliness. There are some consistent findings done by capable researchers about adolescents, for example, showing that loneliness is endemic among them and is becoming a rampant part of our children's lives. We will need to give greater emphasis, in my opinion, that we are linked to one another, and any attempt to promote individualism should also be tied to the idea that individualism is only good when it is seen in the context of other people and the consequences and benefits of one person's actions have for another. Part of the solution to depression and anxiety, for instance, and promiscuity, by the way, is a steady and positive form of association with others. Depressed people, for example, almost always benefit from receiving a periodic telephone call or a text message from someone they believe cares. Think how simple that is. It's a simple telephone call. Hi, calling to see how you're doing, let you know I love you, and so on. What that means is that the affiliative need for us as individuals will never be eliminated, and we should recognize that our children can learn to be individuals and highly responsible to their relationships with others as well. Now, please take a look at your own children and see what influences they are receiving and about the importance of being a strong and responsible individual, and then see if the teaching they are receiving from coaches, teachers, and church leaders also tie individualism to our human need and their human need for others and for what we can give to and receive from them. The last trend, which I believe is a huge mistake, at least in this episode, is the gradual evolvement of the internet shown by the development of new ways to attract attention or adherence, and the impact of these new programs on us and our children. Those who develop apps and software programs for the internet are among the smartest people in the world, and these smart people are good at gauging what people find attractive. They do this, of course, to find places to advertise, because advertising is the money machine of the internet. So let's suppose those smart people come up with a way to gather a lot of information about us, our viewing preferences, and see how many people they are connected with in order to come up with a program that attracts attention and followers. What is it that would attract the attention of our children? Well, as an example, consider the relatively new internet program known as TikTok and something people have put on it known as devious licks. Here's the note from a mother. Quote, as you may have heard, there's a nationwide social media trend called devious licks on TikTok that has so far cost schools across the district or the world thousands of dollars in damages. Across the country, students have had significant consequences for things they have done in these types of challenges. There's a new list circulating that includes theft, vandalism, assaulting people, and other serious crimes. It is called Devious Licks. So the mother says, please talk to your students about how serious these challenges are and the long-term impact you can have on them and others, including a possible criminal record. Now think about it. She's writing and saying to the teachers, would you please do that? Well, I'm saying, parents, will you please do that? So here's an example of the monthly challenges the adherents to devious licks received. In September, vandalize school bathrooms. October, smack a staff member inappropriately. In November, kiss your friend's girlfriend at school. In December, deck the halls and show it's your private parts. January, jab a breast. February, mess up school signs. March, make a mess in the courtyard or cafeteria. April, grab some eggs, another stealing challenge. May, ditch a day. June, flip off in the front office. And July, spray a neighbor's fence. Now, what should we do with that? Be informed, of course, but to take a good hard look at ourselves, and we should see if a few adjustments on our part will make it possible for us to do much better at spending constructive time with our kids, which will include a training program that provides a moral approach, enabling them to discern good from bad at an early age and use their individual freedom to choose and to choose to communicate more with each other. Parents and children together are usually enough when it's healthy to ensure positive growth in our children and our families. When we don't have enough of the right kind, and parents are not willing to mentor their children, that is when, in the 21st century, our children are made more vulnerable in a variety of ways.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Do What Matters Most, which is sponsored by firstanswers.com, where you can find new tools for families and parents of 21st century kids with a focus on emotional self-reliance. Visit firstanswers.com to sign up for a free newsletter. Find Do What Matters Most on Facebook and our website, mattersmostmedia.org, where you can ask Dr. Scoresby your own questions. Remember to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. Give us a rating and write a review on the podcast app or Google Podcasts and let us know what you think about Do What Matters Most.